Gillian and Jennifer. Okay, so I just want to jump right in. So this book, you guys have been through a lot. So how can you, all the struggles that you guys have been through, I know Gillian, you talked about when you first got casted for the X-Files when you were 24, you started suffering panic attacks and you didn't really know how to deal with fame. And Jennifer, you talked about being a senior correspondent at ITN and you suffered depression. And how did you guys go through all these struggles? And there's much more. And how did it shape this book?
Well, my panic attacks actually started, I think, when I was in college, and became pretty much a daily thing for about a solid year at one point when I was working on the X-Files. And I mean, part of what this book is about, it's a collection of principles and tools for dealing with some of life's challenges. And when Jennifer and I first got together, we've been friends for about a decade, we discovered that we both had similar ways of dealing with things, and eventually got to a point, I guess, where we thought, well, these are universal things, and many of us don't actually learn them in school. We don't necessarily learn about kindness or about self-care or about those things that can become more important in life. And why not get together and actually start to talk publicly about some of the things that have helped us through the years, because they're actually available to everybody. It's just that we've condensed them in one place.
And I think, like many people, I was brought up in a kind of when-then way of thinking. I've just got to get the job, I've just got to get the partner, I've just got to get the kids, and then I'll be happy. And I had all those things, and I woke up one day and just realised that I couldn't go on, and I had a huge bout of depression that lasted nearly a decade, and I had to let go of everything that was outside of myself, all those things that I thought would fix me, and really start to go inside. And as Gillian said, what's in this book are universal principles that have been handed down by people far wiser than us, but which really have the capacity to transform lives. And they've transformed both of our lives, which is why we wanted to put them in a book. It's also really practical, I have to say. It isn't just a theoretical thing, they're really practical things that we do on a daily basis that really make a difference.
I mean, it is essentially the handbook that we wish that we'd had through our lives.
The manual of life, basically. So you guys talked about the principles that are in this book. What are those principles?
Okay, well, they start with honesty, acceptance, courage, trust, peace, humility, love, and then my favourite one, which is joy, and then we end up with kindness, which is, taking those principles out into the wider world, because there's no point in becoming happier if you're just doing it for yourself. Well, I don't think it's possible to stay happy long term if your happiness is just about you. You have to be, of service, or that's my experience. Unless I'm also thinking about others, I don't stay happy for very long.
So going through this book and reading these principles, what does the user take away from that?
One of the things I hope that people take away from it, other than tools for living, is the fact that we are so often under so much pressure. It seems like everybody's under so much pressure. Society's pressures, particularly women. We're looking at billboards, we're looking at images of how we should look and what we're meant to fit into and what we're meant to buy, and also the pressures that we put on ourselves to be the perfect parents, to have the partner, to have the house, to have everything, and yet we all seem to be struggling under the weight of that, and thinking that we shouldn't, thinking that somehow we have to be able to lick it, that we have to be that the objective is perfection in some way, and that if we're falling short of that, somehow we're failing. And a lot of what is encouraged in the book is a level of self-acceptance, of becoming accepting, becoming honest about the struggles that we're having, and the fact that we can't but we can't necessarily hold everything up. And also that it's okay to be human, that we're actually okay just as we are, however we look, whatever our skin color, whatever our circumstances, and to start from that place of self-love and resultant self-care. And when we come from that place, it's easier to go into the world and be kinder to other people.
And you know, one of the things that we say in the book is that we would like the P word, which is perfectionism, banned completely, because I think as women we use it against ourselves all the time, and there is no such thing as perfect, and there is no such thing as normal, and we're constantly measuring ourselves by someone else's yardstick, and normally it's a false yardstick. You know, we compare how we feel inside of ourselves with how others look on the outside. You know, it's compare and despair. You know, we compare and then we feel terrible because we only ever compare ourselves with people who are doing better. We never compare ourselves with people who are struggling more. So yeah, end comparison, get rid of the P word, and just give ourselves permission to be exactly who we are as we are.
And you guys touched on in the book, you know, the price of social media and how it affects millennials, and how young women, the rate of suicide amongst young women has tripled from 2004 to 2017. So how can us, you know, millennials go past that, you know, facade and find our true selves, you know, in a world that's of instant gratification of what, you know, people think of us?
Well, I think it's really natural. We all want to be mirrored. From the moment we're born, we're kind of looking to the world to tell us who we are, and that's a natural stage of development. But we need a reaction, and even if the reaction we're getting is toxic, even if every time we look at Facebook or Instagram we're actually feeling worse, we kind of get addicted to that hit, because at least we know we exist. And so, you know, it becomes an addiction, really. It becomes something that harms us but tells us that we exist, and so we can't put it down. So I think the first thing is just having boundaries around it, taking time out. And the next thing is starting to use it in a different way, starting to use it to tell the truth about who we are, not to lie about who we are, but to say, actually, you know what, this is who I am. And we have seen some great moments when women have chosen to do that, but let's use it to go in that direction.
And Gillian, back to you know, pressures as women. You mentioned in the book that you were feeling guilty, you know, as a mother, like you were at work, but you felt like you should be with your kid, and vice versa. How did you get through that, and do you have any advice for other mothers who feel that same way?
Wow. I mean, mother's guilt is something in and of itself. It's quite extreme, and I've suffered from it quite a lot. I've continued to, you know, by the grace of God, work consistently, even at my old age, and it's a constant struggle to carve out, you know, big chunks of real time with my kids in between filming things, and but I'm always the one who's leaving. I'm always, you know, mommy's always going away, and it's become really important that I don't use that as another opportunity to beat myself up. I'm putting roofs over heads, and I am mirroring a working mother, which is very, very important. And also I try really, really hard to make the time that I do spend with them as meaningful as possible. You know, I have been in other situations, you know, but when my daughter was younger, she pretty much grew up in my trailer when I was working on the X-Files, and I would come in from set and I'd have, you know, 10, 15 minutes with her, and then I'd have to go back in again, and I swore to myself that I'd never repeat that I'd never, and sometimes, you know, that's wishful thinking. You know, sometimes I can try as hard as I can not to repeat that behavior, but sometimes, you know, food needs to be on the table, and I need to make that very, very hard decision, and then it's about how I deal with that fact, what I do with that information, and I just have to be kind to myself and let myself know that I'm doing the best that I can, and when I can, I'm as present as I can be, and when I'm away, I just work really hard.
Yeah.
and I was, I was also working unbelievably hard when my 2 children were small, and I just discovered that I couldn't do it. I could not do it, even though I had an employer who tried. It was still a workforce and a way of working that was designed around men who don't have primary responsibility for caring for children or for others, and I just found it absolutely impossible, and so I had to stop. And one of the reasons why we wrote this manifesto, one of the things that really drove me to do it was that, as a woman, I found myself fighting for 50% of a system, but 50-50 of what? 50-50 of a system that's designed around workers who don't reflect who we are. So we get the place, we get to the top, and then we're having to adapt and shave bits of ourselves off. And I don't think it serves men any better than it serves women, because most men I know who have kids want to spend time with their kids and want more than 2 weeks vacation a year. I mean, it's just insane. So this is about trying to create a new paradigm. Instead of leaning in to a system that doesn't work for us, let's all together try and create a fairer system where we all maybe work slightly less hard and have a better balance as a result.
So us women, as you can see, we've all gotten together for the women's marches. The International Day of Women was last week. So we've done this on a larger scale. How can we come on a smaller scale and help each other out? I mean, there's still, competition, there's still jealousy amongst friends and coworkers. How can we, after reading this book, come together as a smaller scale and support each other?
Well, I mean, one of the things we would love women to do is to gather together and read this book as a group, whether it's in a book group with other mothers at the school gate, with your co-workers, or with a meetup group. Just get together and read it together, because one of the things we outline is just a new way for us as women to relate to each other, because society pits us against each other. We're constantly trying to get someone else's look, someone else's way of living. So we're comparing, we're competing, and we're criticizing. We call those the toxic C's. And we would like to replace them with compassion, connection, and caring. They work much more effectively, and we'd all be a lot happier. So that's one of the things that we'd like to see happen.
Also, one of the tools in the book is about kindness, and part of that is kindness to ourselves. When we stretch ourselves so thin, it's very, very hard for us to do actions in our lives that are actually taking care of ourselves. And so it's encouraging that. It's encouraging getting really, really honest about how we spend our time and how we can eke out little bits here and there so that we are actually practicing self-care. And when we're kinder to ourselves, we have the tendency to be kinder to other people. And that's part of one of the things that we're encouraging in the book is to properly look at that, do a kind act to yourself in a day and do a kind act to somebody else. And those, in terms of small ways that we can be of service, not only to ourselves, but to our communities.
And I think also to develop emotional resilience. You talked about the women's marches. We both marched. I was in DC and Gillian was in London, and it was extraordinary to see 5 million women around the world marching, but that's just the beginning. And if we're going to keep going, we really have to take care of ourselves. We have to put the oxygen masks on ourselves if we're going to be of use to other people. And that means really, self-care is actually a radical act for a woman, because we're conditioned to care for others. We're conditioned to think it's indulgent and selfish to take the time that we need to take. But if we don't, we end up vulnerable, needy, and at risk of depression, self-harm, addiction, all of those things. So that's first base, is starting by caring with ourselves. And then when we are doing that, we can become really effective agents for change.
You guys both talk about attending therapy throughout your life and how that's helped you, and that's a start of self-care. Why do you guys think therapy still holds such a negative stigma, and for people who don't want to go, or what can you say, hey, it's good, let's go?
I don't know. I mean, I think on some level it's still seen as being a weakness of some kind, when actually it's the exact opposite. I've been in therapy since I was 14 years old, pretty much in every city that I've ever lived in, and really think in a big way that it's been instrumental in me still being on this planet, and it is actually quite a courageous act to shine a light into the dark places that we often don't really want to look, and often it's the people that are maybe not that courageous who speak about it as being a weakness. It's a difficult step to take, but it's also it's so valuable and so helpful.
And it's really necessary. You know, you just have to look at what's happening politically in this country, and you can see if people don't deal with their stuff, if they don't deal with their issues, if they don't deal with their ego, then they end up acting their damage out on everybody else.
Basically. But this book, I was telling Gillian and Jennifer backstage that these principles are legit. Like, I was reading this to prepare for this interview, and I found myself like, oh my gosh, I have issues, you know? So it really does help you tune in to yourself and reflect. And so these 9 principles, I know you guys say, like, no matter if you have it all, you have all the money, you have the fame, you have, the family, still doesn't matter. You still struggle and go through these ups and downs. So do you guys still practice these principles, and what are some words of affirmation you tell yourself each day?
Well, my first, my natural instinct is towards some form of self-destruction in one way or another, and so I've had to do put a lot of these tools to practice over the years, and it's not a linear thing. Whether my struggles, so to speak, have been self-inflicted or other-inflicted. These tools actually really can help to bring one back to one's core self. And I think probably one of the principles that I have done the most work on, but not necessarily by choice, is acceptance. Very often in our lives there are things that happen that I know for myself that I refuse to want to accept, or somebody behaves in a way that I really don't want to behave, or whatever it is. And letting go of feeling like, or thinking that I have control over people is a hard one to get used to. But what I found is when you're forced to let go, it actually becomes easier. And so I actually enjoy the practice of accepting and letting go of situations. I'm in control. I've got nothing to do with this. I'm just going to sit back and see what happens. It's quite liberating.
And you asked about affirmations. One of my favourites is "I am enough. I have enough." Because it's true, we all are enough just as we are. It's not about the toys. You can't take it with you when you leave this world. We're all going to the same place. So focus on what really matters, which is connection with others. I try and tell someone else how I'm really feeling each day so that I form a really honest connection with another human being. I tell myself I'm loved and that I am loved, because I think we all are. We just forget it sometimes.
And you guys both were very honest and open with each other throughout your friendship. How do you, help another friend who may not be as honest and vulnerable about certain things that they're going through as well? Maybe, your friend, you can relate with them. How do you, help them in that way?
Well, we unfortunately don't have control over other people and their process and how they choose to feel or not feel. And I know that the strongest thing that I can do is to live by example, I guess, and to do the best that I can do. And that maybe some of it will rub off.
Yeah, because it can be really frustrating when you can see someone else repeating a pattern that harms them. But the best thing you can do is love that person and take care of yourself, because sometimes denial is necessary. I grew up in an alcoholic home, and denial served me until I was strong enough to be able to face up to the reality of what I was living with. And often we need to be in denial because it isn't safe to be honest until it is safe. But then once it is safe, you can start to make other choices.
Throughout this book, there's so many awesome quotes from, activists and celebrities. Like, there's a time you could tweet these, like, seriously. What I know one of my favorite quotes was, "Give your morning to God, and He will give you your day." And I know, Jen, you touched on your spirituality and how you grew, after your divorce and your loss of your father, just different things. How did you, gain that spiritual growth through all that heartbreak? And
Well, it was a little, as Gillian said, when you haven't got any choice. You can either be really unhappy or you can make friends with what is. I love that saying, you can either be right or you can be happy. And when you've had kids with someone, you're going to be connected with that person for the rest of your kids' life. So no matter what they've done or how they're behaving, I just decided it didn't serve me, and that the best way I could deal with it was unconditional love. That was my absolute best defense against whatever happened. That didn't mean that I had to accept unacceptable behavior, or that I didn't have to, create space and distance when I needed to. But it just meant that I didn't have to drink that toxic poison of resentment on a daily basis, which is like, drinking poison and wondering why the other person doesn't die. It just doesn't work.
And now we're going to turn it over to the audience for some Q&A.
Hi. So, just listening to kind of both of you talk, it's been really refreshing, because I've struggled with depression and anxiety for 20 plus years, and I think one of the hardest things for me is, like, you always feel like you're alone, nobody knows what it's like, and it's comforting, in a sense, comforting to know that this affects everybody, not just us, whatever, but even people who, are in the spotlight, whatever. One of the, getting to my question, you were talking about affirmations and some things that you do. One of my favorites, I always say, is like, not my circus, not my monkeys. But, when you feel yourself like spiraling down, and you find yourself in a pit or whatever, you have these little affirmations. Like, what are some little things, like one little easy thing that you do in terms of like self-care that helps you at least start to kind of come back up?
I was going to say, one little thing I do is I try and find one thing of beauty every day. And it might just be looking at the sky. I mean, how many days when we're really struggling do we forget to look up? Do we not look at the skyline? And somehow, if I allow myself to just see one moment of natural beauty, it goes into my soul. Sometimes I think depression is a soul sickness. It's a metaphysical illness. It's a longing for connection, as well as, being incredibly chemical and real. And just joy, just finding something of beauty, for me, is a comfort.
And one tool that I've had, which I'd stick to, which is that the minute the alarm goes, I get up. I have to. If I think, just a couple more minutes, then my brain starts to go, and I'm in so much trouble.
Hi, Gillian and Jennifer. I just want to say how much you inspire me to be a better woman and a better mom. I brought my daughter today. Sophie, wave. Anyway, one of the ways you inspired me is to start. You inspired us, and we started a fundraiser for NF, and one of my friends here helped me with it. And I was just wondering, what do you think? I know there's a lot of fan fundraisers, and I know you support a lot of causes. How do you pick and choose which causes to support? Because I know you talk about getting stretched too thin, and it can be stressful.
Well, one of the things that we talk about in We is about choosing that which breaks your heart. The things. Obviously there are so many. There are so many things that we can attach ourselves to, so many wrongs that we want to right in the world today, and I know for myself, for my own resilience with the cause too, is choosing the thing which actually really, really breaks my heart, and what's been for me for the last 2 years has been human trafficking and modern-day slavery, and there's just something about that for me that I know that I will continue to show up in a public way, even when I'm too anxious to speak publicly about it. That's something that I feel so strongly about, that I want to continue to pound the pavement about.
And the other thing is just that some charities are so much more effective than others, and that's another thing we talk about in the book, is that there are some that are 1,000 times more effective. So it's doing your research, because if you're going to put all that energy and work into a cause, you want to make sure that the money is actually going to get to the people that you want to help.
I had a screening of Sold too. Sold was great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi Gillian, hey Jennifer. First of all, Gillian, you've been my inspiration for a very long time. When I was younger, I was told you're ugly, you need plastic surgery, your eyes are messed up, you're fat, and you need to lose weight. Growing up into that, hearing that every day, my mindset is now that way. So I've read your book. I've tried to do the things that you've suggested, like write them down until you can't, they make no more sense. My question to you is, what happens when what do you do when those negative thoughts keep coming back to you?
Well, I think for me, I know that when I'm in that negative thought, I'm repeating the harm that was done to me and that society does to me. So the first thing I need to do is go, oh, okay, my head's gone, I'm in self-harm. I am harming myself with my thoughts. And the next thing is, I try and just see it as noise. Just because there's a noisy drill outside my window, I don't need to listen to every single thump of that hammer. And then I try and put my attention somewhere else, because what we focus on grows. And really, self-hatred for me, in my experience, is a defense mechanism. If I'm a pile of whatever, then that explains why bad things are happening to you, because, we want to have an explanation. We want to have a reason. And if the reason is that we're bad, then we have the illusion of control over what's happening. Oh, well, it's happening because I'm bad, so it's less scary because it's all my fault. But that's a lie. It's not your fault. It's not any of our fault.
And I know too from my experience that when my head starts to go in that way, the most valuable thing that I can do is actually to, in one way or another, be of service to somebody else. The minute I put my head into somebody else who has, who's struggling, then I'm out of my, because it is, as Jennifer said, it is a form of self-obsession. Self-harm is self-obsession, and the minute we put our care and our kindness and compassion to somebody else, it does have a tendency to dissipate.
But this whole thing is a process. It's a lifetime's work, and we have to do it every day. It's like brushing our teeth, our spiritual.
Yeah. We have one more question from the audience.
Sorry.
We have one more question from the audience. Bonjour.
Hello.
So 4 years ago, my father committed suicide. My mother tried twice. So I wish that book came like 4 years ago when my father people have read about it. So my question is, do you think, coming from France and from other people from other country, when would you think like the book would be translated in other language?
I think your English is pretty good to read it in. It's already been translated in a couple languages, I think, German and
Dutch.
and I don't know, I guess the more successful it is, the more languages it will be translated into. Unfortunately, that's kind of out of our control. And I'd suggest Google Translate, but I don't think it's the right message.
Okay, so can you tell everyone where they can get this book?
Everywhere. First of all, a bookstore near you. That's the first place to get there. And second of all,
online in the normal places, and we have a website, wewomeneverywhere.org, which also has links for places you can go, but I think most of you probably know where you can go to buy available in the usual places, but best of all to buy it from someone where you say hello, how are you, and have a human interaction.
We'll give it up again for Jennifer and Gillian.